So it's actually quite easy to get to 1 million if you have something, right? Like that has some demand for it and you're good at some sales, but it's getting to 10 million is actually, quite a grind, because then you have to overcome all the dynamics that set in at some point, between 1 and 10, which is like, churn and retention and upsell. You have to kind of build a real company to get to 10 million, whereas you can get to 1 million almost brute force.
Welcome to the Startup CEO Show. I'm your host, Mark MacLeod. In this episode, I sit down with Nick Franklin, co-founder and CEO of ChartMogul. If you run a SaaS business, there's a meaningful chance that you are a ChartMogul customer or you've been following their data. They just celebrated their 10th anniversary. They have over 2,500 SaaS companies on the platform. Lots of learnings on this episode, including some of the sobering data around how long it takes to get to 1 million in ARR and how few SaaS companies actually get there. Nick's company has been profitable since 2019. It's a pretty amazing stat. And so we talked about the pros and cons of venture funding versus profitability and lots more topics. I really enjoyed this discussion. I hope you do as well. Nick, welcome to the Startup CEO Show. It's a true pleasure to have you. How are you doing today?
I'm good. Thanks a lot for having me, Mark. Great to be here.
Yeah, it's my pleasure. I always love chatting with people in Asia because I'm like chatting in the future. It's tomorrow. It's always tomorrow. So that's pretty wild. And, I followed ChartMogul from a distance from a long time. I first met you, I think it was like a 0.9 Capital Summit outside of Berlin many, many years ago. And this was long before remote was a thing. And I was shocked to learn that you were living in Korea. So I definitely want to chat about remote at some point because it's become, thanks to COVID, a reality for many companies, but you chose remote, kind of from the beginning. So I'd love to explore that. But before we do, I'm sure everyone knows what ChartMogul does, but maybe let's just take a second and set the stage and tell us what your company does.
Sure, yeah. So we have two products, but our main product and what we're well known for is subscription analytics. So that means a bit like Google Analytics measures your web traffic and gives you insights around that. We measure your subscription revenue. So we plug into the billing systems like Stripe, Recurly, ChargeBee, etc., pull in all that billing data and calculate a lot of key metrics like MRR, churn rate, retention rate, LTV, etc., and allow you to calculate those accurately, visualize them, and then sort of slice them in different ways to uncover insights. So that's the main thing we're known for. And then nearly 2 years ago, we launched a CRM as well, which is fully integrated, which is sort of the first CRM really designed for B2B SaaS companies. So we're kind of building out this platform where you can do your CRM and your subscription analytics all in one if you're a B2B SaaS business. Yeah.
Wow. I have to admit, I didn't know about that extension, which sounds really big, could be really big. Could eventually, I would imagine, be larger than the initial legacy business.
Let's see. It's a long play. It will take some years to make a dent. It's a large market CRM, and it'll take some years to make a dent. But we're definitely seeing uptake there. But our focus has really been on adoption versus trying to monetize too much. We just charge like $39 a seat, right? So you'd have to sell a lot of seats too.
This is true.
To make it into a real business, but for now, and we have a free version which is definitely more popular than the paid version of that, and but there's a whole bunch of reasons why we think having the two in one makes sense, like this that you can do when you have all the data sets together, the subscription billing and the metrics and the CRM stuff all in one. As you can do interesting stuff with forecasting. You can do interesting sort of triggers and things, when someone schedules to churn, automatically create a task and assign it to, their account manager. You can just do a lot of stuff that is just harder to do in HubSpot because it's kind of it's more of a general CRM. So that's kind of why, what drew us to, go into this market, is we think we could do something fun that's just for, just for SaaS businesses, but then more than they could get in a general system, I guess.
Yep. No, that makes a ton of sense. So, when I entered the startup world, the term SaaS didn't exist. And then SaaS came along as a term, and I remember Salesforce starting out in the beginning with the anti-software campaigns, right? No software with the logo through it. And so this whole world was nascent, this thing that we take for granted now. And this, I remember when Bessemer first started coming out and talking about things like their magic number, and like we're blowing everyone's minds with like how to think about SaaS businesses. And now we take it for granted, actually, probably in large part thanks to companies like yourself, because you bring that sophistication to even brand new SaaS businesses. So I'm really curious, like, what is the state of the art of SaaS metrics these days? Is it still the core metrics that Bessemer's been talking about for, I don't know, 10, 15 years, or has it become more innovative? I haven't operated in some time. I'm just curious, what is the latest and greatest when it comes to thinking about metrics for recurring revenue businesses?
I think there's definitely a core set of SaaS metrics that doesn't change like every day, right? Things like monthly recurring revenue and run rate. I think retention gets a lot of focus these days, especially with the market not doing as well as it was a few years ago. And I think there's also different things you can do with do with metrics that hasn't yet been built out, or we've been at the forefront of building out. And I think there's, with the rise of AI SaaS companies, there's more and more people doing metered billing. So we'll be launching this year our solution to that, which is an analytics around usage-based and metered-based billing, and how you can layer that on top of MRR, and how these kind of traditional fixed cost things and metered interact with each other. So, but yeah, I don't think there's, people can come out with, sometimes they come out with new, magic numbers or whatever, quick ratio and things like this that come out regularly. And it's just like, how often do they stick, and how often do they make sense? But I think it's a bit like, accounting, right? Like not, new stuff doesn't come out all the time. Not very
creative in accounting usually means a bad thing, whereas creative and with software could mean something positive.
With software metrics, yeah, I don't know. Like, so I think it's good that the core underlying metrics, like monthly recurring revenue or committed monthly, like they don't change every day, and we kind of standardize the way in which things like retention and churn and should be measured, and a lot of the difficulty and complexity comes around with, when you try to start, filtering and segmenting that stuff and playing with those metrics in different ways, and you start having to account for, customers that switch currency and things like this. So a lot of the complexity kind of grows from that, but I think the base metrics don't change that often, really.
So I've always told folks, like, the things that matter most, and I'd love to know if I'm missing anything or you disagree, but I guess first of all, payback period. It's going to be a long time before we know kind of true lifetime value. So as a defensive measure, at the very least, how quickly do I get paid back on a new channel? Obviously, in the long run, retention is, in my opinion, the most important metric for a recurring revenue business. And then if I think about how aggressive to be, I think about lifetime value to CAC kind of on a fully loaded basis. And if I'm kind of sub 3x, I'm not feeling so good about life. If I'm north of 4x, I feel like maybe I could be more aggressive. Like, what are your thoughts on those metrics? And are those the ones? And how do you think about what's the right measure to be shooting for?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's, so the metrics that you're referring to are kind of what I would kind of determine as kind of scaling unit economics, or sort of sales efficiency metrics, right? Like, how much should you spend to acquire a customer, versus how much that customer is going to pay you, right? And like how comfortable are you waiting, 1 year, 1.5 years, like, in order to get the initial cost of acquiring the customer back, right? So I think, for me personally, I don't really think about these metrics running ChartMogul in our day-to-day, because the vast majority of our customers are not acquired via paid means. And that's often the case, even with some pretty heavily funded companies. I used to work for Zendesk 10 years ago or 11 years ago before I started this business. And even though Zendesk was heavily funded, we still got something like 85% of our customers via word of mouth. So there's not, or maybe people searching for the word Zendesk on Google or something, not a paid channel. So it's like there is no, cost of acquisition that's directly measurable or payback period that we're really worried about. And I think a lot of SaaS companies today are in that boat where, even if they do spend a lot of money on acquisition, they, the vast majority still comes from word of mouth. And so, optimizing those, they would look at LTV and CAC and payback for this portion, but not for the most of their business. It's not so core. But there is a certain category of SaaS business that is usually quite enterprise, usually quite heavily VC funded, usually based in Silicon Valley or certainly in the US. It's not very common to have businesses like this in Europe, where they tend to go more after the SMB market, and companies like Pipedrive or Todoist or things like this, where they pitch. They tend to go more after the SMB market, higher volume, and it's more of a sort of marketing led sale. But yeah, for the sort of sales led sale where there's teams of SDRs, and very heavily VC funded, and they're kind of going for that kind of sales led, paid acquisition model, then these are very essential metrics, and you got to get it right. We personally aren't doing much of that. We have in the past, and I used to always want to try and say, well, we need to get the money back from the acquisition in less than a year. That was kind of my feeling, is that maybe 6 to 9 months ideally. So if you're paying like on average $5,000 to acquire the customer, ideally that customer is going to be paying you about $8,000 a year or something like that. So after the first 6-7 months, you kind of paid off the cost of acquiring the customers. But yeah, it's a more risky strategy because, things can go wrong. The customers you could acquire might not be the same as the ones you already have. They don't behave in the same way. They cancel after 1-2 months, and then you've just burned a bunch of money on acquiring them. So it's not necessarily why I personally spend a lot of time doing a ChartMogul, because it's just not our go-to-market motion. But I realize that is a go-to-market motion for a fair number of, especially heavily VC-backed sales-led type businesses. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, we were going to get into your funding journey, and you've deliberately been very capital efficient. So haven't maybe had the temptation to start burning a lot of money on paid acquisition. But certainly I only coach venture-backed CEOs, many of whom have raised hundreds of millions of dollars, and they do very meaningful paid acquisition work. And but absolutely just get the world that you've described, that's for sure. And the difference between those kind of heavily venture-funded companies versus not. I'm curious, you've got this view into however many customers you have and their metrics, the good, the bad, and the ugly. Do you ever kind of benchmark that? Do you have a view of what best-in-class performance looks like? I don't know, if I'm like looking to raise a Series A round in the next 6 months, do you have a sense for what I need to look like to do that?
Sure. I mean, well, I wouldn't talk about too much what you need to do to raise, but in terms of benchmarking, absolutely. So on the first of every month, we aggregate the metrics from all of our customers. There's about 2,500 active ChartMogul accounts. We aggregate all of their numbers and produce live benchmarks in the product. So anyone can sign up and look at those. You don't need to actually run a SaaS business to do that. And it's free. And yeah, I mean, it shows the trends month over month or quarter over quarter, year over year of, I think we only do a few metrics. One is like time to reach a milestone. So how long did it take you to reach 1 million ARR or 5 million ARR, 10 million ARR? And then, growth rate, recurring revenue growth rate, how fast you're growing. And then there are different retention rates, like customer retention, net revenue retention, gross revenue retention, et cetera. I think these days anything anything above 100% on net revenue retention is best in class at this point. It used to be quite common where, a large chunk of our base was getting, better than 100% net revenue retention. 3 years ago during the Xer era, money printing era. Now it's definitely best in class, where probably the majority are below 100% net revenue retention. And the top, I have to look it up, but the top sort of percentages are getting 100 and 100, maybe 110, 120 would be definitely best in class on net revenue retention. At the moment, I'm hoping it goes back to more. I think it's now stabilized, and hopefully we'll see some improvements there. But yeah, I mean, I think a lot of companies the last year or two most focused were more on logo retention, so like sacrificing a little bit of revenue in order to keep the customers.
So discounting, you mean?
Yeah, either we've been doing the same, like flat or lower a lot of the time. So no increases in price, or even sometimes reductions in price, to just make sure that we keep the customers, through some of the tougher times we had. I think the tough times are probably over by now. We're now in a kind of, but there was definitely a period of sort of 2.5 years from 2022 to middle of last year where definitely there was a lot of cost cutting in SaaS, and that has ripple effects. A lot of SaaS companies, they make their money by selling to other SaaS companies.
I was going to ask about that actually, right? Because you've probably got many different segments, but I would imagine you have a large chunk of customers who are themselves young startups, and therefore times were great in 2021 and then times not so great thereafter. So is that the case? Do you is your customer base basically like representative of kind of the ups and downs of the startup industry as a whole?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, we definitely see, I think there's been no slowdown in starting new businesses, but definitely established businesses, like they're not growing as fast as they were during the 2019 to 2021, I guess, is like kind of peak money printing era. And yeah, like, so we definitely see those trends play out in our customer base, but often something comes along that helps out. Like right now we get a lot of new AI startups. Even though they're AI, they're still doing regular subscription business models most of the time. So kind of helps to pick things up. And yeah, but yeah, definitely we have a lot of startups using the product, and that impacts. Yeah, I mean, if startup land is doing really well and booming, and startups are growing super fast, then we'll do well.
Right, you're basically a barometer for the industry.
Yeah, especially the SME industry. I mean, we have a few of the larger companies that are like public companies, but it's a minority. Like the vast majority are sort of in that 1 to 20 million ARR range. And so definitely we have a lot of data in that range. So.
I don't know if you have data on this, and I wish I had a specific stat to quote, but I read somewhere once that basically a small fraction of all companies get north of $1 million in revenue, and a fraction of a fraction get north of 5 million in revenue. And we sort of take it for granted that those are just small, easily attainable numbers these days, because there's just so many companies and so much funding that, we just get numb, right? Someone raises 10 million bucks, 30 million bucks. We just think all the numbers are big and it's all easy. I'm curious if you've seen any data in that, because you probably got a real cross section of companies. Some are funded, some are not. Like, do you have a sense for what percentage of companies reach 1 million ARR, or how long it takes?
Well, definitely how long it takes. The number of companies that reach 1 million is probably a tiny fraction, right? Because so many people starting companies, right? Hundreds of thousands of SaaS companies now getting started, and a huge number of those will just get very negligible revenues, and maybe that they get closed down, or they just tick along, doing a few $1,000 a month or a year even, like there's just very, very high numbers now. So the conversion to 1 million ARR is probably sub 1%. But do you call them all companies when it's just one person and it's more of a project and they haven't, so I think looking at how long it takes. So in our data, I have it right in front of me. It's sort of like the median is for companies that do reach 1 million ARR, it takes them 2 years and 9 months. So that's of ChartMogul customers who have reached 1 million, it takes them less than 3 years on average, and top 25% a year and a half, and then the top decile, the top 10% is do it in 8 months.
Oh wow, 8 months, that's great.
Yeah. So, and you can do that to like 10 million, and then it's like the best companies, the top 10%, do it in 2 years and 9 months. So they do what the people that get to 1 million, they do that in 1 year. They do that in they do 10 million in the same time period, right?
Unbelievable.
What percentage of people actually get to 10 million? It's very, very small, but it's more just, I guess, looking at people, what percentage of people that get to 1 million get to 10 million within a certain period of time, and there's pretty harsh drop-offs. It's actually quite easy to get to 1 million.
I agree.
Like if you have something, right, like that has some demand for it, and you're good at some sales, and it's getting to 10 million is actually quite a grind, because then you have to overcome all the dynamics that set in at some point between 1 and 10, which is like churn and retention and upsell. You have to kind of build a real company to get to 10 million, whereas you can get to 1 million almost brute force.
This again brings up for me capital efficiency, and again we're going to talk about your funding journey later, but just that observation, right? Like reasonably easy to get to 1 million, pretty hard and rarer than people think to get to 10 million ARR. And yet you look at funding rounds these days, and like 10 million ARR is, you're still going to be underwater. You're still going to be below investor expectations. And actually, ultimately, the common shares are still going to be worthless. I think people who are going out and seeing their competitors, their peers raising 10 million, 30, 50, are thinking, oh my God, I need to do that, without understanding necessarily the implications of it. And like, you have preserved optionality, right? You've been so capital efficient that, I don't know your revenue, we don't need to talk about it, but like you've got over 2,000 customers. I can probably figure it out. And like your common shares are in the money, like you could choose to sell the company and you'd be fine. But there's so many folks who are just not in that boat today.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely, I think one of our VCs who's well known in the world of SaaS, Christoph Jans, on Point 9, where we met the first time. He wrote a blog post some years ago. I think it's like about 4 or 5 years ago. Titled something like "The Growing Disconnect Between Two Business Models: VC and SaaS." Like, there's just SaaS is now very big, right? It's tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of SaaS businesses. VC is really around finding outlier companies, regardless of the industry, right? It's about finding really outlier businesses that could become billion-dollar companies, right? And that's kind of like, so the idea that every SaaS company, or even 20% of SaaS companies is going to be like VC compatible just doesn't make sense, right? The reality is, it's like the vast majority of software companies, and SaaS is just basically software companies, right? Like, and traditionally software companies, I think they weren't always VC backed, right? Like if you were building a software business, and I think SaaS definitely made the markets bigger, and it definitely made a lot of software businesses that were probably not viable at all become viable, right? So we have customers that allow you to manage your herd, right, and things like this, like like a goat herd, like literally, because there's enough people doing that in the world that you can actually have a viable software business that's probably not a VC-backed software business, but it probably wouldn't. So we probably wouldn't be like too surprised if we saw an announcement on like a tech media saying, this SaaS company that does herd management has raised $5 million in VC money, right? Like that wouldn't actually, it would be like, yeah, fair enough. Lots of farmers, SaaS, they raise like $1 million. So it's like, but then at the end of the day, is it $1 billion opportunity? I'd have to think about it, but probably not, right? Like, there are a lot of farms. So I think definitely there's a disconnect between VC I think things have cooled down a lot the last couple of years, but definitely 2019, 2018 through 2021, things got crazy, and every SaaS company that wanted to get funded with a little bit of metrics, a little bit of traction, and the right team, they seem to get funded. And it's it's sort of whether or not that's going to be a good outcome for the founders, for the investors, probably sort of depends on what they've done, how they orientated their themselves, and how well they did, and how how capital efficient were they, etc. So, but yeah, definitely a lot of there was definitely a lot of over raising going on, and it didn't really make financial sense for anyone. Yeah, I think we come back down to earth now. Things are a bit more, the SaaS companies that really are outliers, like definitely companies like Notion should get funded, right? And things like that. But, maybe, but the vast majority shouldn't. The vast majority, it's not that expensive to build a SaaS business and to get some customers, and then to fund the business based on the customer revenue. And that should really be the business model from the vast majority of SaaS businesses. I think, should only be seeking the VC money.
Best source of financing is revenue.
Yeah, exactly. And you should only be seeking the VC money if you're really going for to build a massive global platform, billion dollar or multi-billion dollar outcome, and you're confident that you have a shot at that, and that's what you're going to do with the money. I think that's the where VC really makes sense. Yes.
This episode is brought to you by Fellow. Tell me if this sounds familiar. You wake up, you take a look at your calendar, and you see it's filled with meetings, stand-ups, weekly check-ins, one-on-ones, town halls, and those are just your internal meetings. Some are productive, but some are definitely slowing you down. Be honest with yourself. How many times have you thought this meeting could totally have been an email? Now consider that in the US alone, there are 55 million meetings each day, and 85 to 90% of those don't have an agenda. Fellow is on a mission to solve the meeting problem by offering the only AI meeting management solution that covers every part of your organization's meeting workflow. And as a Startup CEO Show listener, you get 300 free minutes of AI recordings if you sign up today. Go to fellow.app/CEO to start your free trial and start having better meetings. Could you talk us through, your funding journey? I think, the last published round I saw was 2017. ChartMogul to me is sort of, like I say, almost a barometer for the SaaS industry. You're 10 years in. I do want to talk about that 10-year reflection maybe right after, but presumably, and for most of those 10 years, you lived actually in the longest bull market in the history of bull markets. And you were a barometer for SaaS. So as SaaS was growing, probably everyone's portfolio company was using your product. Like you had to have lots of temptation to raise, and yet didn't. So I would love it if you could just talk us through that.
I mean, sure. So we raised 3 seed rounds basically. The first one was 2 angels and 0.9 pre-rev in 2014. And that was 600,000. And then we raised top up of 900,000 like 8 months later or something like that in 2015, sort of just after we started getting traction and some revenue, all from the same people. I think we added 1 more angel in there, or maybe 2 more angels in there. And then we raised a 3rd round like 2 years later in 2017, also from the same folks, but we added Alvin in there as well. And that was 2.2 million. And that round was actually sort of not what I initially went out to do. So I initially went out to try and raise a Series A. I went up and down Sand Hill Road, and I, literally pitched people in the US and in London and etc. to try and raise kind of a Series A, maybe $6 to $8 million, and actually really didn't happen. Somehow we didn't. I think basically we just didn't have the traction, and we didn't have the numbers to warrant that. So we just weren't tripling and doubling every year. We're at a few million ARR by now, and the numbers we just weren't like snowballing into towards 100 million ARR. And I think that was something good that actually happened to us, because I think if we had got funded, 2017 was maybe if I had done the same thing in 2020, we would have things got much more. Maybe we would have raised. But maybe I'm just bad at fundraising. That's also highly possible. And but anyway, we decided to instead raise a smaller round of 2.2 million, and from Europeans, Point Nine and Alvin and a couple and the same angels that have been backing us, and we that was the last time we raised. Like within 2 years, we had got to cash flow positive, and we've been profitable ever since. So that's been 7 years since, I guess, something like 11.5 years since we raised capital, something like that, and we've been operating profitably ever since, and just reinvest. I think I was looking at the total. So we've collected something like close to $50 million in revenue from our customers in the last 10 and a half years, or 10 years, 10 years of actually selling the product now. 46 million, I think it was, something like that. So, you could say, well, we haven't, 46 million. So we haven't raised, again, and we only raised $3.7 million from investors, but we could also raise $46 million from customers. So just reinvested basically all of that. I mean, except a very small amount that we, build up some cash buffer, but we reinvested all of that into R&D and everything to build the platform.
So I don't know Alvin, the fund you mentioned, but I've known Christoph for a very long time, even before he had a fund, when he was just investing his own money. And I know he's extremely founder friendly, but I'm just curious, was there ever, I don't want you to talk out of school, but just any tension there where VCs might want you to raise more, like, they don't typically get in for companies to be profitable, right? Like they are chasing, and Christoph, right? What made Christoph was Zendesk. And, it wasn't profitable. So I'm just curious if there was ever a tension there.
Not really. I mean, I think, we always try to, not underinvest in the business, so that, if we did have a way to convert, large pools of cash into growth, we would have done it, right? Like we've always had money in the bank available, to try different experiments, right? And we tried outbound. It didn't really work for us. We tried it several times, mixed results, but we tried different types of paid marketing. But we found that, the things that work for us don't necessarily, scale with just piling more and more money into it. So I don't think there was so much tension there. I mean, I think maybe there was mutual trust between investors and myself. I think as long as you go into things like, aligned, where you say, okay, everyone's aligned on the idea that we try to build the biggest business that we can. We try to grow as fast as we can, within reason. Obviously you don't want to, even if you're heavily VC backed, doesn't mean you should be wasting money. But so I think we kind of did those things, and it produced a company that is a solid company, right? Like we have 64 people today, although we just hired 2. So starting next week will be 66. The 66 people salaries. That's profitable, that's stable. But after 10 years, if you look at Zendesk, where Christoph invests, I used to work. within 10 years, there'd be like 500 or 600 employees that was preparing to go public within this kind of same period. So, it's definitely a different outcome, but I think that's why, VCs place, lots of investments, right? And some go to zero.
A good number go to zero.
Do something in between, right? Like, and some become unicorns and huge exits, like Loon, right? It sold almost $1 billion to Atlassian out of 0.9 fund. Right now, well, maybe we still could, but right now we're somewhere in the middle, So also it's a bad result, and I think we're still a solid business.
You talk about the difference between you and Zendesk, but you are in rare air compared to most companies, right? Have achieved the traction you've achieved.
And sure, wouldn't it have been great to be one of the 1%ers that kind of have produced a unicorn within 10 years and are preparing to go public? Sure, but I think in just given our market that we're in, the niche that we're in, the dynamics of the market that we work in as well, how easy is it to onboard customers, etc. I felt like we did a good job, and we have a good product, happy customers, good business, and maybe eventually it will get to that same scale. But for now, it's business. I don't think it created really any tension with our VCs. I'm sure they would have wished for like any I also made a handful of angel investments. I would have 100% preferred them
to be unicorns.
I think 2 of them exited, or 1 of them exited. Like since I started doing this, as more of like a hobby thing. But no unicorn exit. And definitely I would have preferred them to have had like some massive exit, and but that's why you make multiple investments, and you don't like.
Well, Christoph and I had an investment in common in a company called Unbounce that you probably know, and that was also very capital efficient, and was a win. They've been bought by private equity now, and was definitely in the win column. Not an outlier home run, but very solid win. So I'm curious for you. You recently celebrated your 10-year milestone in October, I think. So first of all, congrats on that. That's a huge milestone, and I wonder if you could just reflect back on kind of the highs and lows and the key decisions that you made along the way.
It's definitely been a long time. So almost 11 years, I think, with the same job title. We celebrated our 10 years since like incorporation earlier this year. I guess there's different phases of the business, right? The first year or two is just like a little bit manic, right? Like I quit my job at Zendesk. I originally went part-time, and then soon afterwards went full-time, and then trying to get something built, and then launching it, and then getting some traction, and then raising money, and it's just doing so many things you've never done before, right? Like never launched a product. Well, I had launched products before, but not a sort of paid subscription SaaS product in the same vein as that. I'd done some other projects in the past, but not a SaaS business. So, getting first users, first customers, getting some press, some traction. It's just like a blur, almost the first couple of years, like so much, it's a little bit crazy. And then, I think things settle down, and you kind of get into we got into a bit of a grind. And then I think, we're kind of on that VC track in my mind, almost like the mindset was like, well, we need to like, hit these milestones to raise the next round. I think once we decided in around 2018, it was around a year after we raised our last round, we said, okay, we don't seem to be on this track that's going to take us to, an IPO or whatever. We need to think about what's the right path for us. And so at some point in 2018, we decided that we're going to, get profitable or get cash flow positive. And we're also going to become a remote company as well. Prior to that, for the 4 years before that, we weren't really a remote company. We had an office in Berlin, office in Toronto, and
Toronto. I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We still have people in Toronto. Yeah. Toronto and Vancouver actually. And we still have an office. We have an office here in Seoul, and we still have an office in Berlin. But it's very optional to come to the office. I can't say because it's a better backdrop than my apartment for this podcast.
Right.
But most of the time I actually don't come to the office. So we went remote, and we decided to get cash flow positive. And I think that was a big turning point around 2018, 2019, when we actually achieved cash flow positive. We'd gone through the transition of going remote. And I think for me personally, I felt like, much more aligned with, what the company should be, right? I think it's no fun at all trying to run a VC-backed company, and where the company you're running isn't really VC compatible in terms of A round, B round, C round, D round, IPO, right?
Yeah, you're constantly feeling bad about yourself, trying to live up to unrealistic expectations.
Right, and you're constantly trying to hit milestones that you cannot hit, and you're constantly thinking, okay, how can we get to the next? And you're constantly burning more money than you should be, which obviously puts a fuse under the company, right? You're like, oh, we're gonna run out of money in X number of months, unless we hit these milestones that we can't hit, and therefore, so it's really just a draining experience for everybody. No one's having a good time. The employees, the team, the founder, the VCs, it can't be good for anyone, right? So I think we decided to get off that switch mindset around 2018, and it kind of got there in 2019, where we're like, okay, we're now profitable or cash flow positive. Let's stay there, and that was really good timing too, because it was just the start of bad timing, good timing, but COVID hit, right? And this is when the demand skyrocketed. 2020, 2021, we had two really intense, crazy years in the industry where demand for SaaS products really skyrocketed. And going remote also then became the thing, right? It became a trendy thing as well. So we'd gotten out ahead of that, and we saw tons of demand for our products. So our revenue growth was actually the best it had ever been in 2020 and 2021, and we were profitable. So this was really fortunate timing for us, and we reinvested all of that extra money into really building up our engineering team, because we'd never really been able to build everything we wanted to build fast enough. So I felt like, that was really important. So we built up the engineering capacity and built out a whole bunch of stuff.
Built a CRM.
Now built a CRM as well. So, so I feel like, and I think, ever since 2019, I've been operating, which is now, so it's been 5 years, operating in this profitable, methodical company building mindset where it's we reinvest, we build for the future. Every decision we make, I try to make, every hire, every product, every architectural decision, it's kind of okay, will this decision still be good in 5-10 years time? When we hire you, always do I want to work with them? If it has to be for the rest of our career, would we be happy to work with them? Things like that. So there's no craziness. It's calm. It's much more calmer. And for me, it actually suits my personality better in a way. I think it's more enjoyable. I think there's many things about scaling. And I went through early in my career with Zendesk, starting when it was a very small company, just 10 people, leaving after the IPO. It's a few hundred people. And it's a fun ride. But obviously when you're adding loads and loads of people and just scaling rapidly, it's also stressful, and it's also creates a lot of tension. And you're not necessarily running the best business either if you're just trying to, you know what I mean? You're not maybe spending in the efficiency. So I think with ChartMogul, it's a very run business. It's a very well run business. I gotta talk myself up, but
no. First of all, the results speak for themselves.
Well, I would happily probably trade some of that for faster growth, actually.
Right.
some tech, like if there was, but there isn't. I don't think there is a way to just, just run things a bit more loosely and we'll grow fast. It's not like that. So
So you weren't tempted in 2021, like you just had like 2 really strong years, your best years. I'm sure you had inbounds from every VC, and you will also be on the radar screen of private equity now. And you could maybe like reset the cap table, keep going, but set the clock back to zero. Never thought about doing either of those.
well, we didn't really need the money to in terms of into the company. We did get every day, like as a lot of people in SaaS do, private equity reaching out. We had a couple of acquisition offers as well. And we decided to just keep going, like keep it simple. But for me, what I enjoy is designing product, building product, and getting it in the hands of customers. That's really fun to me. For me, like that's enjoyable. Yeah, like I get a kick out of that. Designing good products with features, building them, crafting them with the team, getting the customers using them, and getting that dopamine when the customers are like, "Damn, this is great. I love this. Thank you." Like that's a good dopamine feedback loop. So it's just, well, let's just get that going faster and faster and work on the rate of innovation. And I don't know if like, you know, yeah, like I don't think the financial markets like, really help there. I mean, unless I guess if you want to do an exit, but I never really, there was never any offer we can't refuse. And I'm not so massively motivated by money. But of course, if there's some, massive offer, then would definitely consider it. But there was never some like insane offer. So
I'm very curious just on the product front. You serve SaaS businesses. One of my CEOs, I have a few CEOs in kind of in the very deep into AI, one of whom thinks that SaaS is just going to disappear, that software is just going to auto write itself in the not too distant future. Just what are your thoughts, if any, on that?
yeah, and was it there's a clip that went viral from the interview with Satya from Microsoft where it's like he's talking about how everything is going to be, all the logic is going to be at the agentic layer. Yeah, and then all the business logic will be there. There'll be a database with your data in it, and how the UI will be. I don't know, Chat GPT. Like who knows? Like, what's the plan there? I think anyone who's super confident about how the direction in the future is going, it's not necessarily like a positive. Like if someone's like super convinced that this is for sure how the future is going to be, I think it's a little dangerous. Like I think you could say, I think it's good to always say, well, it could go in this one direction or it could go in this direction. Certainly, AI is having an impact already. We also sell now AI enrichment product add-on to our where we can enrich customer records for better segmentation or lead scoring, etc. So I think there are certainly areas where AI enriches, disrupts certain SaaS companies that already exist in a big way. Whether or not, like I think the UI layer is so important, right? Like if you kind of own the UI, use the interface with the user, then that's very important. And it's sort of like how do people want to interact with software? Like, do they want to do everything via a chat UI? It's not so certain. Okay, and then if AI is going to write all the software, well, I'm not sure yet about that. Maybe eventually, once there's, but some engineers are very, very smart people.
Yes, that is very true.
They are needed to write today's software, like that level of competence, intelligence, training. So if you could get an AI that can do that, it's pretty it's pretty superhuman. And I think that doesn't just change the software industry. it changes changes the entire world. So to have, replacing a really senior software engineer with a computer where they can really understand the platform and everything about it, and architect, add new features to it and make improvements, etc. Also, a lot of software development requires significant sort of collaboration with customers and other teams. Like sometimes when we release a new feature, we have to, be like, okay, well, we have existing customers using, if we rewrite a feature, using the feature, so how do we migrate them onto the new thing? With the data might change, so we need to have a conversation with them. So it's like quite a bit. There's quite a bit to it where it's not just, if you don't have any customers or any data or maybe their computer could write something. So a part of me feels like to replace senior engineers at ChartMogul with an AI, then the whole world would, like, the AI would be so intelligent that the whole world would change. That's kind of a bit of a win there. And whether or not, SaaS is going to be so heavily disrupted where people don't want tailored user experiences, tailored user interface to the domain, is TBD, I think.
Do you see a world where, I don't know, there's some agent that your customers use that's basically like a FP&A analyst on steroids? I don't have to hire someone to crunch everything. You're just crunching everything and benchmarking and just giving me the insights. Here's the top 3 things you need to do today to grow your business. Do you see that world?
I think that's definitely an idea that a lot of people have had, and a lot of analytics. There are some dedicated, like just general BI companies that have launched things in this space, or who have got heavy funding in this space to go ahead and launch things. Who are working on that. Being able to ask for insights, like, hey, just go and tell me how to grow faster, right? And I think that's probably where things could well go. And as long as they kind of show their workings and say, yeah, like, I believe, like, I've done this many different scenario analysis on how you could tweak your pricing, and even if you change your pricing in this way for new customers and you migrate existing ones in this way, then I believe the outcome will be faster growth and more revenue, etc. So you could potentially, this is the kind of conversations you have internally anyway with your internal team, right? Whoever does that analysis, might be someone in RevOps, might be some finance or whatever. Probably a fair bit of that could be automated, or at least done. You could perform that much faster with the help of such an agent. And we have thought about that. So I think that stuff's coming. I think, that AI is definitely going to more and more creep into every SaaS product.
Yep, I believe that.
And where it can enhance or improve, it will. Like, for now, it seems making sense of unstructured data is where it's absolutely, like, killer, right? So for us, our AI enrichment add-on, it sends an agent out to the website of our customers, scans the website, and it can tell you things about that company. It can find how many employees they have. Perhaps it can find, is it a SaaS business? They have subscription pricing. Do they have public pricing or not? These are things that are really actually, and it can get that really accurately and real time, by just sending a bunch of agents out to scan through all the websites, all the publicly available websites of, like, hundreds of thousands of businesses, and all that unstructured HTML and text, etc., can be passed into custom fields that you can then segment on. So that's really where AI is super powerful right now, and it's really cheap. It's way cheaper than paying a Clearbit or a one of these data companies for that data. Who it's very disruptive there. but yeah, more and more it's gonna be disrupted for sure in more and more areas. So my job, I guess, is just to make sure that we're not missing out, like we're not missing something. But whether or not there's just this massive tidal wave that's gonna just sweep away all business software and replace it with something new, where you'll no longer open up, Notion. Instead, you'll just open up like some GPT prompt and it will just do it. I don't know yet. I don't know. I just can't see it yet. Like I don't see the way. Like I still think there's value in these products, because this is how these products are built, also with people in mind. Like if people aren't going to go away, right? We're still going to be involved, and there's certain ways that we like to interact with things, right?
Yeah, I don't have a crystal ball on this one, that's for sure. Maybe as we begin to wrap up, Nick, I'm curious how someone with an illustration background trained himself to become a CEO and know all the things about business and selling and marketing,
So I'm not sure. So I went and studied computer animation in San Francisco when I was like 18, and then I got it, which is computer animation. You still have to do a fair bit of it's fairly technical, but it's still an arts degree, right? And I did switch, but then I actually started sort of helping out with a local startup, sort of interning there while I was there, and that kind of got me exposure to programming and that kind of things. And then I moved back to England and switched to illustration, and I was quite bored just drawing all the time. I think I did that because it's like I was relatively good at drawing, and it was easy for me to get into like placement, I guess, at university. But I remember I launched a website called amateurillustrator.com. It's like a social network for artists. It's when social networks were popular. MySpace was like Friendster, and then MySpace, and then Facebook was coming out and getting popular. So I launched something where you could upload your artwork, and there was a forums. It was mostly just like PHP. But I remember teaching myself LAMP stack, like Apache, MySQL, PHP. And so as a university, launched that and got on TechCrunch actually in 2006. So there's still article on TechCrunch, I think, from 2006 where we launched this thing. So that's pretty fun. And then, yeah, I mean, after I think in my final year of university, at the start of the year, I was like, I was just determined not to have to be a boomerang, kid and go back and live with my parents. So I was like, okay, what can I do to like make enough money that I also find interesting? And I found this job at this company. I applied this company called True Knowledge that was later renamed to Evie. And that was a startup in Cambridge in England where they were doing like AI question answering. So you ask it a question and give you an answer. And I got a job there. And that was fun for about a year and a half. And I, one of my roles was setting up Zendesk for them as a product manager. And then eventually Zendesk hired me after they raised Series A. So I just got into software that way. Yeah, Evie was interesting. It actually became Amazon Alexa. So Amazon acquired that company and
oh, wow. That's great.
became Alexa. So it's kind of interesting. And for the longest time, you could ask Alexa questions about the various employees of this startup in Cambridge, and it would like have
really?
quite a bit of knowledge about them. Yeah, including myself. But I think at this point, the back end's been like completely swapped out, and it's no longer works. So yeah, I just kind of got into software like that. But yeah, I didn't have a formal like training, software training. But and then yeah, at Zendesk, I was more on the sales, account management, support side for the European and then the Asia markets. And then, but I definitely found that my heart was really in product, which I think is for me the thing that I really enjoy is some more like some creative and designing product and thinking about what will resonate and what will be useful for our customers, right? Thinking like, well, what are they going to find useful? What are they going to find engaging and interesting to use and get value out of, and then designing good solution for that. So yeah, part of starting this business was to kind of, try and have a go at starting a business, but also, to get back into kind of product building. And, but yeah, it was good to have 5 years experience doing sales and commercial stuff, because then when I got into starting my own business, it was like, I had that background knowledge around, how the sales works in software and things like that. So yeah, I mean, but yeah, how do you learn to be a CEO? I mean, just have to learn on the job, right?
You just put the reps in.
Yeah, I mean, I had done management, so I'd led a small team in London and this team in Manila, and in Manila we had about 20 people, something like that, and I also had employees in different, like in Hong Kong and Japan and things like that on my team. So I've kind of done some management, and I've been working for about 6.5, 7 years at that point. 5 of which was in a B2B SaaS business. So you just kind of see what's going on. But yeah, I mean, I've never managed team of engineers, teams of marketing people, teams of finance, hiring finance. Like there's so many functions. Like you have to, in order to, you have to have quite a decent amount of knowledge, right? In all these areas that you're really, like in the beginning, you're so clueless about, right? Like that's the hard part about being a CEO, is like, you got to kind of, in order to hire a good head of marketing or a good head of engineering or a good head of, finance, or you kind of need to know what a good one of those VPs, or you kind of need to know what it looks like, right?
That's right.
In the beginning, you make so many mistakes, like for sure. I think being a second-time founder is such a superpower, right? Because you've been through that, you've got the scar tissue, you've learned it. And so I think there's a reason why second-time founders, they just make so much fewer mistakes, right? And now ChartMogul's in a great place. You have a great team and great leaders in all the functionals. But it took me, so many years now, 10, 11 years of running this business, where, to really understand, like, to get that like pattern matching around, how are things working, so when a team isn't functioning right, you kind of know, okay, that's not right. Like, we need to make a change there or improve something there. So yeah, it just takes time. I mean,
Maybe final question, Nick. So you're profitable, you have infinite runway, you've turned down exit offers. Presumably you enjoy doing what you're doing. I've been seeing a smile on your face throughout this conversation as you talk about different parts. So do you still want to be running this 10 years from now? Do you feel like, I don't know, eventually, especially as you're moving into CRM, right? Like mathematically impossible to run out of TAM for a good SMB CRM product. And I certainly think there's probably a venture fundable opportunity just on Salesforce's churn. So, what are your thoughts on that? Do you want to?
yeah, although we are selling it just for the SaaS market, so not for the entire market, but that probably is. Yeah,
But still a large TAM.
But yeah, so to your first question, I hope I'm still running it in 10 years. We're having a great time, and I think we are still just getting started. So like, we just had our most innovative year yet, where we shipped more features and more code and more improvements than in any other year prior, 10 years in. So that was awesome. And we're going to go even harder this year. And so the product that we have and the platform we have it's really unrecognizable from a year ago, or from 2 years ago. It's like, so I think in 1-2 years, like, we're really upgrading. I see it's kind of like becoming from a product or point solution product to becoming more of a platform where you can really run, the commercial side of your business on ChartMogul. So we're kind of on that journey right now of becoming like a really platform where you're gonna, it's really the commercial center of your business, and you can run things on ChartMogul. So that's a long game. It's going to take several years to really achieve that. And so we're going to do that. There's no plan to raise money. We're just going to keep reinvesting customer revenues there. I don't see, but never say never. Right? I'm not really against raising money, and it's actually been a positive experience for us. I mean, also people talk about, for us, it's been a positive experience. We've picked good partners, and they brought a lot more to the table than just money. So I don't see it as I think as long as you're not really under investing, right? That's the main thing. Like you want to stay competitive. Whether or not be running this in 10 years might depend on that AI question, like
Yeah, that's right.
if there's an AI super intelligence coming to take over everything, then I think everyone's job's at risk. Everybody's business and job is at risk, and everybody has to adapt. We'll have to adapt to that. So far, I don't think we're there. We still just hired 2 more engineers. I think if I was so worried that the quality of the code being output and the capabilities of these systems, which we do use, so we're not quite there yet. But yeah, hopefully that'd be great. I think to build anything really great, it takes a long time. Like to build a great company, I think 10 years is just that's the minimum. That's like the table stake to build a solid company, right? For a lot of businesses, like even the businesses like OpenAI, which is like this runaway once in every decade success. It's only just getting famous now, but it was probably started more than 10 years ago. I don't know when the exact launch date, or around 10 years ago. So I think to build a great company might take 10, 20 years,
That's a really important point. I completely agree with you. And that speaks to like, it's so much easier to start now than it was even 10 years ago. But that doesn't mean you should start. You want to start it because, I don't know, you feel like you have to. You're just so in love with this problem that you're still going to want to work on it in 10 years from now, when, to your point, you feel like you're still just getting started, right? So
yeah. One good thing about remote is that the company can kind of follow you around as well. So and it follows our employees around. Like we have 2 people relocating, one from Germany to India to be with our family, and we have one from Vancouver moving to Spain, I think, in the coming months. So, but they're staying with ChartMogul. We had someone move here from this office. We had 2 people move from this office in Seoul to Europe last year. So, but they stay with ChartMogul. So, and for me, I've also sort of moved from Germany to Korea, and I don't think I'll stay living in Korea forever. But while I go to England or wherever, I can still work for ChartMogul. Whereas if everything's in one big corporate office, you kind of, if you want to stay as the CEO, you probably have to stay in that like office, right? It's going to be hard to unless you're the Starbucks CEO or whatever. Like
yeah. That's right. He does commute.
You kind of cut the jet budget or whatever. But you know what I mean? So I think remote is kind of good for that. That the longevity, allows for that.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I had Joel from Buffer on the show recently, and he was a client of mine back in my investment banking days, and like he's been able to kind of live all over the place, and they've got his employee tenure is really strong, and I think a big part of that.
Yeah, us too. We're starting to have people celebrate 10 years.
That's amazing.
And 10-year anniversaries and 9-year anniversaries, which is awesome. And yeah, Joel, Buffer also a customer of ours as well.
Well, this has been amazing, Nick. Thank you so much for taking the time, and it's been a pleasure to dig a little deeper into the ChartMogul story. Like I say, I was following it from afar for a long time, and a few of the startups I was at were customers. So it's really great to see, and really excited to see where you take the business. Thanks again for making the time and coming on the show.
Thanks, Mark. Thanks a lot.
Hey, thanks for listening to the Startup CEO Show. We'll see you next time.